Hello, everyone. Welcome to TIFF's first ever digital dialogue. We are thrilled to have filmmaker Alice Wu and host Jasmin Mozaffari with us this evening. We're streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and at tiff.net/industry. My name is Jeff McNunn, and I'm the Senior Director of Industry and Theatrical here at TIFF. Our guest, Alice Wu, is the writer, director, and producer of the Netflix film The Half of It, a smart and compelling romantic comedy about Ellie Chu, a Chinese-American teenager who helps a boy win over a crush. The only problem is, Ellie unexpectedly falls for that same crush. The film won the Founders Award for Best Narrative Feature at this year's Tribeca Film Festival and was listed as one of the best films of the year by A.O. Scott at the New York Times. The Half of It is Alice's follow-up to Saving Face, which played at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2004. If you haven't seen Saving Face, you should. It's fantastic, and it's currently available on our brand new digital TIFF Bell Lightbox platform, so please check it out at digital.tiff.net. Although we are not in the building right now, TIFF Bell Lightbox is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Wendat. This territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As you join us today, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you're on, who the traditional keepers of the land are, and what the treaty relationship is, or if it's unceded territory. I'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, and our major public supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. And most importantly of all, we'd like to thank our front-of-the-line workers who are working to keep us safe, healthy, and fed. We could not have gotten through these months without them. TIFF is a not-for-profit, and like many cultural institutions, we've closed our doors to protect the health and safety of our communities. And we've been financially impacted by it. To ensure we stay strong and continue to transform the way you see the world through film, we have created the For the Love of Film Fund. I invite you to consider making a gift today at tiff.net/loveoffilm. TIFF's industry programming is supported by Ontario Creates and Telefilm Canada, and tonight's digital dialogue is presented in partnership with Netflix. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Jasmin Mozaffari. Jasmin is a Toronto-based filmmaker whose debut feature film Firecrackers premiered at Toronto International Film Festival in 2018 and won Best Film in Competition at the Stockholm International Film Festival. The film went on to win 2 Canadian Screen Awards, including Achievement in Direction. Jasmine's also one of our inaugural TIFF Talent Accelerator participants, a year-round program that supports 6 female creators funded through our Share Her Journey campaign. And without further ado, over to Jasmin.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited tonight to be speaking with the really talented filmmaker, Alice Wu, about her second feature film, The Half of It. Before we get into that conversation, I just want to read a little blurb about The Half of It to give everybody context. This film has been described as a teen-oriented spin on Cyrano de Bergerac. Alice continues to explore in playful and nuanced ways the theme of young Chinese American women realizing their sexuality in this contemporary coming-of-age story in which self-acceptance and friendship prove to be more gratifying than romance. I'd like everybody to welcome Alice Wu.
Hi, thank you so much, Jasmin.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. It's a sort of surreal times, but I'm very happy and honored to have you guys here. Thank you for that nice intro.
I'm honored to speak with you because I just watched this film ahead of our talk, and to me, this film is so enjoyable. It's an instant classic. It feels modern. It's a coming of age story, but it feels fresh. And to me, I'm like, I wish this story existed when I was young. It's just as much of a classic as any John Hughes film to me. So this is an industry talk. So we're going to focus a lot on how you made the film. But before we do that, can you just briefly talk about what inspired you to write The Half of It?
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. I mean, I'm sure I'm significantly older than you, so I literally am the generation that grew up watching John Hughes movies in the theater. So yeah, he certainly did have a huge impact on my upbringing. I never set out to make a teen film. To be honest, when I started to write this, I was really wanted to explore that sort of love. Like I wanted to talk about love through the lens of like a lesbian woman and a straight man, right? Because I was thinking a lot about how just as a society, we tend to exalt romantic love. And I'm fully, like I watched so many romantic comedies and romantic dramas growing up, partly because my parents didn't let me watch TV. So we're only allowed to watch classic films or Chinese soap operas. And so my sort of I honestly probably escaped into storytelling a lot, especially as an American-born immigrant, where, I was very shy. I didn't have I'd always have one friend. So I disappeared a lot into books and into movies. And I think there's a part of me that genuinely just bought into that happy ending where you get to the end and finally everything comes together and you find the love of your life and everything is fantastic, right? And as I've gotten older, I think that is important. I think romantic love is incredibly important, but I don't think it's the most important love. I think it's just one of many, equally important loves, right? And I think as I get older, I also don't necessarily see that oh, you find someone, that's great. Or your friends, they get married, that's great. But it doesn't really seem like then their life just crescendos into this wonderfulness and then everything ends. There's life continues on. And actually more often than not, there's far more life to come than, the life that led up to that point. And so in that, I started thinking a lot about the different forms of love. And that led me to sort of write this project that was really inspired for me. If I'm very honest, I'm a lesbian and I came out to myself my senior year of college. And my first real heartbreak, even coming out to myself, was actually over a guy, over a straight guy. And it was over my best friend, partly because it was I don't know that he's the person who really helped me more than anyone accept myself as gay, because he just treated me oh, I was no different, right? And at that time, that would have been 1989, 1990, 1991. That was not a time when I think people were maybe quite as accepting of being gay or being queer. And I think for him and I, two nerds in computer science, just trying to figure out how to get a girl, both of us were just how do we do this? There was something so when I recognized that kind of the love and the bond that we had, But then we were in a society where, well, then why are the two of you not together, right? Like there's a way that I think it's very hard for people to wrap their head around. Maybe it's easier now, but certainly back then, it was hard to figure out where our actual human story fit in the narrative that we've grown up watching. And, you know, as things happen, like our friendship sort of like, as we grew up, it sort of dissipated. And it was something I'd always thought about, that kind of deep, I mean, it's funny, like if you break up with someone, even if you're only dating them for a few months, everyone is like, oh no, are you okay? But like with friendships, when those sort of slightly fritter, people don't always know how to like even celebrate that, not celebrate, but how to deal with that breakup. And I think all of that fed into my wanting to write something about that. And then recognizing at a certain point that like when I tried to write about it as people in their 20s, I realized that it was hard for me to figure out an ending that felt, I didn't really know how to end that film, to be honest, because it felt like any ending I came up with was either going to be, like either I'd come up with an ending where it's like, yay, this feels really happy, but it doesn't entirely feel earned. Or it would be like, oh, okay, that ending feels real, but now like, what a bummer. Like we're all just sort of like, you know, like this is so sad. And so given that, I started thinking like I should set this in high school because only in high school is every feeling so huge. It's like every feeling's the first time you have that feeling, right? And so in your 100 minutes, you can actually cover a lot of emotional territory. Like you can sort of, you know, everything feels so huge. But also I truly do think that, you know, I turned 50 this year. If you like someone or you get rejected, you still feel like you're 15. You know, I'm sure that if I'm 80 and I'm in a nursing home and if I have to be in a situation where I have to go over and tell someone I like them, I'm sure I would regress to being 15. I don't feel like, oh, all my experiences led me to a more exalted, mature place, or at least I haven't. And also no one that I know. Sorry, friends out there. like we all seem to, right? And so I think there's a wonderful thing about high school movies is that most people have gone to high school. And most people remember the just the tender experience of all those firsts. And so I think I don't care how old you are. Like I think we all relate to that. So I love that you said that you wished you could have seen this when you were younger. But I also think that there's a lot of people who are a lot older who are relating to the film because it brings them back to that time and that kind of longing. And you know, just trying to figure out who you are in relationship to both yourself and to love.
Yeah, I totally resonated with that. Like when I was watching the film, I'm like, I relate to this now in my 30s. So like and I think all those layers you're talking about made the film feel fresh and the perspective is fresh, even though the coming of age genre gets a lot of flack now. And I think I'm like, that's never going to go away because there's so many perspectives we haven't seen of that genre, and this is the half of it is one of them.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of momentum in a filmmaker's career, and Jeff touched upon your first feature, Saving Face, which I watched after I watched your second feature. I'm like, another classic, and everybody needs to see that film. It's so amazing, and your characters are always so well written and feel so authentic. And you described that film as an Asian lesbian rom-com once in an interview I read. And it was such a successful film. And then you took basically a 15-year break, which you spoke about so many times in interviews. And I know you took that for personal reasons. But I wanted to ask you, I guess, about this idea of momentum in a filmmaker's career. I think certainly I felt that pressure after my film came out to follow up soon with a second feature. And I still haven't. And that pressure is from the industry, it's from myself. Did you ever feel that in that time? Or do you think that I'm just interested to hear your idea on this idea of momentum?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And it's one that I think about myself, you know, it's not one that I feel like I have an absolute like empirical answer for as much as, well, let me say this, like when my first film came out and like it got released by Sony Class 6 in 2005. And I absolutely I had my agent saying before it was released, like, you need to know what your next thing is. And I was like, oh my God, I honestly like that film, an Asian American lesbian rom-com, which maybe today sounds like, oh yeah, of course we could make that. But honestly, in 2004, 2005, who thought that film would get made, right? Like that was like and I thank you for saying it was very successful. It was far more successful than I'd expect, but I didn't have any idea so many people had seen that film until this film came out. Because I thought it was like a small Sundance film that all Asian and queer people had seen, and like maybe a few random like outliers. But I actually didn't realize that more people had seen it as like almost like a cult film, because it's relatively, I think far more people have seen the half of it and now are discovering Saving Face, right? So even on something like that was so small and so personal, I was a little astonished that all of a sudden people are like, you can have a career. And because I'd gone into it, like you mentioned, you're in your 30s now. I was like 34 when that film came out. I had like filmmaking was a second career for me, and I was trying to make that film for my mom. I knew the chances of it getting made were minuscule. So my thought had been I was going to give myself 5 years to try and make it, and if I didn't, I would have enough money to try and find a job, and that would be it, right? Once it got made, I did feel this pressure of like, oh no, what's next? And I had like no plan. Like I hadn't, because I didn't go into making Saving Face thinking I wanted to be a filmmaker. I went into it thinking I want to make that film. It turned out that I actually loved directing. Like I loved being on a set. But I would say that for me, and I know a lot of people this is not true of, I think for me, I am somebody who needs to really emotionally feel the thing I'm making, and if I don't, I can sort of intellectually, like I certainly right off of that, I definitely had like jobs where I was writing, or like I can do the writing. But at heart, I'm a writer director, right? And the reality is, and I know this now after having made the half of it, I think at that time in the industry as well, like basically the things that were coming my way were very much like, great, she did this like Sundance darling. How can we, like, is there a road where we can get her to make the next big romantic comedy that would be very straight and very white? And the things I was reading were just not scripts that I loved. I was like, okay, probably people will go see this, but it's very hard for me to, maybe because again, I came from computer science. So if my goal is to make money, I would have just stayed in computer science. Like I don't have a burning need to make a film. I have a burning need to make specific stories. And I think that's still true of me, where like, I'm getting sent a lot of stuff, but the reality is, even when I think a script is fantastic, the question I always ask is, but am I the best person to do this? Because if I'm not the best person to do it, then why am I wasting anyone's time, right? Like I feel like there's someone else that's right for that. And meanwhile, I'm just going to keep working on my own stuff. And every now and then, maybe there will be that project that someone sends. It's like, that clicks, and that's great. But I also don't feel like I don't think the world owes me a film. And I feel like, listen, I have like a couple of my own projects. I hope one of them ends up getting written to a place where it's good enough to like go out with. But let's say it doesn't, or let's say I do and everyone rejects it, right? It would be a bummer, but I'm not really someone who feels like if I don't make a film, like my life is over, like another film, my life is over. I feel more like I'm going to do the best I can. And the reason I say this to you is because I think at a certain point, every filmmaker kind of has to ask themselves, and I don't think there's a right or wrong on this. I think you have to ask yourself, are you someone who really, like for you love the actual act of being a filmmaker, and you're willing to like take on projects that maybe will help you grow and help you stretch, but you don't have to like feel it with like you'll grow to feel it with every fiber, but you're good with being like a director for hire, and I think there are a lot of incredible filmmakers who do that. Or are you someone who's more like, you're so driven by the actual project, and if you don't have a project you love, then you would rather not make the sacrifice, like all the sacrifices that come, they're inevitable when you are making a film. And I happen to be in the latter camp. So for me, momentum matters less because, I mean, it obviously, like at this moment, it would be easier for me to get, like if I suddenly had something I was dying to make, it's probably easier for me to certainly make it in this moment than it might be 5 years from now. I mean, I don't know, right? But if I don't, then it doesn't really behoove me to try and push something that I don't love. So I guess the question of momentum really comes down to, again, sort of what you want for yourself, because there's really that path that says, okay, I have this. Maybe the next thing I want to do is to take a property that exists and put my stamp on it, right? And I think the momentum is important. Like maybe but if that's not the case, I don't know. I guess I feel like I sort of do believe in the law of temporality, that I think projects have like a time and a place when they're meant to happen, and you do the best you can on your side. But you have to slightly trust that, again, that if, I don't know if this makes sense, but if there's something of yours that you want, that it will happen in the moment it needs to. Does that kind of help answer your question?
Oh yeah, that's amazing, like advice to hear. I think I've never heard a filmmaker put it so honestly. I think we just kind of hear people saying, well, I had to have something written before my first feature was done, otherwise I would never get a movie made again. But you're an example of somebody who got a second feature made with Netflix. And so in a way, it makes me question all of that pressure, and our world's changing all the time. So I appreciate you saying, make it when it feels right for you to make it. Don't just force something. So yeah, I think that's valuable information for everybody who's tuning in to hear. I wanted to talk a little bit about writer's block with you, because I read that just given what we know now about sort of the break you took, you did find it in you to like start writing a second feature. And I was reading that you did have a bit of writer's block at the beginning, and there was this anecdote you had about writing a check to the NRA that I just thought was so funny. And I was wondering if you could briefly share that with people and your thoughts on working through the first draft, which can be so daunting.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm pretty sure that will be the thing I'll be known for, is that check to the NRA. Actually, I'm not a social media person, but I've had to get on social media because that's the primary way that like nowadays people get, or certainly in Netflix, like they get the word out about a film. And someone wrote, because of that story, like, Alice Wu lives life on nightmare mode, which I thought was so hilarious. Because if you know me at all, I'm like literally the other day, I was like looking at my hoodies and being like, which of these hoodies should be my house hoodie? So I have like the most like not boring life possible. But so I left the industry. Long story short, I had literally just sold a TV pitch to ABC, and then my mom had like some major health issues, and I dropped everything and came to San Francisco, which is where I live now, for what I thought would just be a few weeks, which became a few months. And after a while, I finally was like, I'm an only child, and I was like, I have to move here. And in that time, I was 39 at the time. I thought like, all right, I'm just gonna. I thought I'd left the industry, maybe partly because of that momentum thing you're talking about, where in my head, I thought it's like, well, if I step off this treadmill, I'm never going to be able to get back on, because who the heck am I, right? It's not like, I'm not like here I am, like some famous, filmmaker that people know. Like nobody knows who I am. So if I come, it will be like it will just be so much harder. So therefore, I literally thought the moment I get off, I will never. That's the choice. But it wasn't a hard choice, because I'm very, very close to my mom. And I didn't write for like 6 or 7 years. I thought that was over. And I do improv. I do stuff. So that was my creative outlet. Like I do long form improv, and periodically I think about writing again. And then it was like epic writer's block, where I'd sit down to write, hate everything I wrote. Oh dear, I wrote it. See, that's how bad it is. Hate everything I wrote. And then, those 2 days would go by and be like, I'm never writing again. And then, another year would go by. And finally, what happened what actually happened is that I had like several things happen at once. One is my mom's health had gotten like stabilized and had been stable for about a year. And I sort of hit this place where I remembered thinking like, what is my life about? Like, you know, I was in my 40s and I had decided like my 40s will be about my family. But now that in a way, my family didn't absolutely have to have me anymore. Right. And I remembered thinking like, you know, I don't know. I don't know for sure if God exists, but I actually spend a lot of time strangely thinking about it. And I remembered thinking like, well, let's say there is a greater universe. I can't imagine that universe thinks that my primary purpose in life is to be someone's great daughter or someone's great girlfriend, and that's it, right? And that's when I started thinking like, well, then what am I supposed to be doing? And that's when I finally started writing again. So I feel like it came out of strangely a sense of purpose. And that's actually my touchstone now for when I want to do something. Is for me, I need to be like my first film I wrote for my mom. Like that very much was a film I wrote because I wanted to tell my mom that her life wasn't over at 48, that it could be beginning. This second film I very much wrote because I was thinking about love and the nature of love. And I wanted to say something about just that kind of like how friendship can be just as important, right? And so in that, like all of a sudden I started writing, I started to like outline what was about to become the half of it. And literally in that first month, out of nowhere, an exec who's always wanted to work together writes me like, and I don't even have agents at this point, like out of the blue writes me to be like, are you still writing? And I was like, that's super weird. I literally just started writing. And she was like, well, I'm at DreamWorks Animation. I have a project. I keep thinking you'd be the right person to do it. Will you pitch my boss? And so I came up with a storyline, pitched her boss, got the gig, had an incredibly fun 7 months writing for them. And at the end, it went well enough that they're like, great, we want to hire you for this other stuff. And that's when I was like, I think I've never written something for myself to direct since Saving Face. I think I want to try to write my second film. And then quickly, so this is so you'd think like, great, I got and started writing, but what actually then happened is I just went back into, I'd go into my office. Well, what actually happened is like 6 months after that, they called up and were like, are you done with your spec? We have another project. Do you want to pitch for it? And I had done zero writing whatsoever. I'd spent 6 months Googling about Trump, reading about like the demise of our country, like lying on the floor of my office thinking like I'm the world's worst writer. Like it was just like awful. And so finally I was like, well, I'll just take this gig, right? I'm happiest when I'm working. And that's when a friend of mine was like, Alice, I think you're just gonna be miserable until you actually write that script, even if it sucks. So you just gotta get it out and move on. So that's when I was like, embarrassing but true, I am externally motivated. Like I don't miss deadlines when they're externally imposed. But I just don't, I guess I just skip my own internal deadlines all the time. So I need to find a consequence that is so terrible that I can't live with myself. And what that consequence was is I wrote $1,000 to the NRA. I gave it to my friend CJ, who's like a butch firefighter in the San Francisco fire department, who's the only one of my friends who absolutely would send that check in just because she said she would, right? And I was like, I'm gonna give myself 5 weeks. On August 8th, this script has to be written. It could be the worst first draft, but it needs to be a completed film. These two people will read it, will confirm it's fully done. And if not, you're sending that check in. And then I proceed to tell every single one of my friends. And it was the most stressful 5 weeks because they just all texted me the entire time, like, you better not become a donor to the NRA. And I was like, but I got, that's how I got the script written. And I think for me, as I suspect a lot of filmmakers are, I'm not somebody who can look at something and be like, yeah, this is 50% there. And tomorrow it'll be, like next week it'll be 60% there. I'm like, this is the most horrendous thing until I'm pretty close to 90% there. Like, it's almost like it just sounds like nails on a chalkboard to me until it's suddenly something. And I have like zero ability to sort of hear the little bits of music before it becomes music, right? And so I think that's why first drafts are so painful for me, because the writing is so crappy in the beginning because you're just trying to find it, right? And I think literally what drives me is fear, like the fear of like having to turn that check in, or like if I take a gig, it's always true. I'm always like, oh no, I can't believe these people hired me. This is going to be a disaster. And like the whole first part, I'm like terrified and not sleeping, working. And then it comes together, and it always does. And then at some point I'm like, oh, that's like, and then I feel, but the first part of it is always torture. And I think I just have come to live with that. Like I just finished a weekly, like a script doctoring gig, which luckily went really, really well. And the first week was me being like, this is terrible. I can't believe they hired me. I'm going to work 24 hours a day. And then like by the second one, I'm like, hey, I think this is actually quite good. And then, but I think I just need to accept that I will hate everything I do until I feel like it's okay. And so I guess maybe, I mean, I wish for other people that's not the case, because I don't think it's a super fun way to live. But I sort of accept this in myself. So I think I think for me, I just always have to put like, I have to have some accountability thing that forces me to get through it, or I'm just not going to. It's just too painful.
Yeah, that resonates with me so much. I find writing very painful. Like, and it's not. Yeah, I don't see it either until way later. Like I'm never one of these people who's like, I'm going to write 3 pages a day and now I've done my 3 pages. Like to me, it's like, but it's not there yet. And that stresses me out. So I want to normalize these experiences with writers and writer directors, because I want people to realize that it can feel painful. It's not always fun. So yeah, I was glad you shared that.
No, yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm glad you said, yeah, these are such great questions, because they're making me realize like, oh yeah, that is true. That is how I feel. So thank you.
Well, I think a lot of people feel the same way. There's sometimes shame, I think, around that, because you always meet somebody who's like, I've finished all these drafts. And then you're like, but I'm not that.
Yeah, I hate those people.
Yeah.
And I feel like, honestly, this is terrible, but I feel like I know some of those people, and not, sorry, I have no close friends who are those people. I mean, I feel like I've met people like that. And I actually genuinely question if the writing is that good, because I feel a little bit like, I'm not saying we all have to be tortured to make, because I don't want that to be true. Like maybe that is not, but I do think that if you want to write something that resonates, I do think you need to put yourself through it a little bit, like I think you need to be writing. Like if I'm not feeling stuff when I'm writing, it's very hard for me to imagine anyone else is going to feel anything when they're watching it. Right. And so that probably means in the beginning that I have to put myself through the pain and the fear, which probably mirrors the pain and the fear that my characters are going to be going through, because I don't really write films where everyone is just perfectly fine. Well, I don't, and I also don't like any films where everyone is like blithely fine and then everything works out, right? Like I think mostly everyone has to go through stuff. And I think there's probably something about the writer's journey that mirrors what the character has to go through.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm going to ask one more question myself and then start turning it over to audience questions. The half of it focuses on Ellie, who's an Asian American teen who's queer. She's coming to terms with her feelings for her classmate Aster. And then the film also touches upon a lot of other things, like the immigrant experience, as we see with her father, and their experience living in a very small, mostly white town in the USA. So I found there was like an incredible universality to your film, but it's also very kind of still a new perspective on the coming of age genre and groundbreaking. So this is kind of a layered question. When you were pitching this story, did you feel that execs were open to this perspective for this genre? And did you face any of the same things you faced making Saving Face with the studio? And then I just want to get all this out before we go to audience questions. The other thing is, which is a part of this, do you have advice for filmmakers who are eager to tell a story from a perspective we haven't seen before, but it might feel trepidatious to start writing or to pitch their story in an environment where they don't see themselves represented?
Yes. Okay. So this is a great question. I may not be the right person to answer it because I've never developed either of my scripts with anyone. I didn't pitch either of these stories. I wrote the scripts. In the case of Saving Face, I won a screenplay award contest. Well, and again, with the half of it, I had the scripts already, like this, especially because who the hell knew who I was? So it's like I had the script. It got slipped around town. Like I had 3 different financing offers, one being Netflix, one being a specialty theatrical distributor, one being private financing. And it was like a long, like it took me months to decide because I'm such a old school theater person. Like my first film was shot on 35 and I really wanted the theatrical. But I ultimately decided on Netflix because for this specific film, I remembered thinking like, oh, it's technically more cachet. At least it used to be like, theatrical. Like I want, of course I want to be like, oh, I'm a serious filmmaker. But I was like, the reality is this film is just going to be seen by more people, particularly since I wrote this thing, hoping that people in the United States, we call them red states, like people in more conservative towns, might watch it. And those people are never going to go to the Landmark Theater to watch this movie. They're not even going to go if it was playing in a mainstream theater, they wouldn't even go. But those people in the privacy of their own homes might press play, right? And then head of that Netflix division took me out to dinner and was saying like, why did you write this? And as I started talking about why I said it, Trump and the reasons why I realized like, oh, I have to go with Netflix. Like they're the best game in town for getting it out to those people. Now, the lucky thing because at the point I decided to go with them, like Roma hadn't come out, Private Life hadn't come out. Like there were all these amazing movies. They were about to come out in a few months, but I didn't know that, right? So the good news now is that I do think, it is unclear to me, like how the breakdown is of like cachet or not cachet, but certainly far more Tony filmmakers than I have worked with Netflix, and it's certainly not considered if you do a Netflix movie, it's not it's no longer like it's just some sort of made for TV film, which in my head I had thought coming back into the industry that'd be the case, and it's completely not. And it is also true that far more people saw the half of it than I suspect would have if we had gone the theatrical route. Now, this all said, I'm a very specific kind of filmmaker, though, that I don't. I'm very, very stubborn about what like. I don't think that's specific to me. I think many filmmakers are stubborn, but what I mean is that I'm not really like when I think about developing something with someone, I become like, ugh. Like I really like to just go off by myself and figure it out. And that doesn't mean I don't get perspectives from people. Like I might send it out to like a few different friends and see what they think. But I like to be in the position where it's kind of up to me whether I take notes or not, right? Like it's more like if you're saying something and it makes sense to me, great. I don't, especially with stuff that I'm working on myself. I've never had the experience where it's like I pitch something that is personally like this, like that is this sort of that's this personal to me, and then developed it. And I suspect that would be hard for me. I think the fact that this went through where I got financing, but both cases I found the financing first, then brought on producers that basically produced that script. Like the script is, like the movie is extremely faithful to the script that I wrote. Like the only couple of things that were different were like we couldn't afford a diabetic cat. There's like a diabetic cat through line that went out, right? But other than that, it's like, and there's one whole scene we cut out that's a confession booth scene that we just released as a deleted scene this week. But other than that, it's like nips and tucks and like, but it's very faithful to the script. And I think that, I don't know, that's just been my experience. Maybe in the future I'll discover, I'll find the right home. Like there might be, like it might happen that there's a different model now in Hollywood, and maybe there are people now who'd be more willing to trust me because I have 2 films and maybe developing would be fine. I don't know. But I'm also not someone who needs someone to pay me to make my like I would rather forego being paid for something that's like personal to me. I'd rather forego that, write it, get it to the place that I feel good about it. And then just figure out who is on board for that. Because a lot of people who are very smart people won't be, and that's totally okay, right? Like a lot of smart people would look at this and be like, yeah, not the film I want to make. And it's like, totally cool, go with God, right? What you want is the people who are like, yes, I love this, I will back you to make your movie. Like, and Netflix was actually amazing. They were like amazing creative partners. They were completely, like they had smart notes, but there were also notes that they're like, here's our notes, do what makes sense to you. If you don't, but like, we trust you. Like they were really, really great about that. And I felt like I suspect that's an unusual circumstance. Like I know, or I suspect Netflix might be a little unusual, but I've heard that for many filmmakers, that's their experience too there. But like, yes, that's kind of that. Now, I think the second part of your question is, do I have advice for someone who wants to develop? Is that right?
Well, just if they're developing something that they are taking in and they do have to pitch, or because I just know with Saving Face, I read that there was pressure to change the characters to be white, to be straight. I don't know if that's something I read that's true or not, but
it's true in the sense that there was not pressure. It was just that nobody wanted to make that movie unless I changed it to, people were like, they were actually shocked that I wanted to try and make that movie. They were like, this is a great script. We just need to make the characters white. We'll get Reese Witherspoon. And I just said no. So the thing is, there wasn't pressure after the fact, if that makes sense. It's more like, oh, people would be interested, but they would want to do whatever. And I would say like, totally understand. I don't want to do that. And then I would just move on until I found the people who are like, okay, we'll let you make that film. Like it's a small budget. Yeah.
Right. Which I think answers the question is find the people that understand your perspective and make the film with those people. I think is probably the safest way to go about making a film, really.
Yeah. I guess ultimately it's this. I totally get it. If someone's like, I need to be paid, then that I get that's a different thing. But I think if you need to be paid to write your thing, you're giving up control. You're giving up some control. Personally, I'm more a fan of find some other way to like support yourself for something that's yours. I think the later in the game you introduce and bring people on, the closer that thing is to what you want, the easier it is to figure out who's really on board for the thing you're making.
Right. Excellent advice. I'm going to go to questions from the audience now. This is a bit of more of a creative question. What was the inspiration behind the cinematography of the film, particularly the moment when Aster and Ellie's faces half seen above the water?
Okay. So obviously, one of the things I really want to make sure, because when you read the script, you could imagine a broader, sort of brighter kind of just a little bit more of a, I can imagine someone might read the script and think it was much more of a brighter, slightly broader comedy, right? And I was always very clear that, look, I want to do a more mature treatment of this. Because for me, I like the kind of comedy where I will always forgo the joke for the emotion of what's happening. Because I think that if you're feeling for the character, when the laugh comes later, it you'll probably laugh harder, but it also hits you more, right? I want the kind of comedy where you're going to cry at some point. That's the thing I'm always going for. And so similarly with everything, with production design, with music, with the cinematography, I really want to elevate the sort of maturity level a bit and be like, look, this is a movie. I don't think it's a teen movie. I think it's a movie of teenagers in it. And so I want to shoot it, like I'd said up front to both my production designer and to my DP, one of my influences is Edward Hopper. When I think about that train station, when I think about building, I'm this is the palette I'm looking for. I want things I would drop images in for them. And I'm like, this is the kind of thing I want us to feel. And also for me, location's very important. And this is set in Eastern Washington. I really want us to feel the textures of Eastern Washington down to the wind, the kind of tree frogs you're listening to, or tree frogs are native to Eastern Washington, right? All of that. So it builds this unconscious sort of soundscape, but then also visually you feel oh, okay, this is where we are, right? And I think, and also the cinematography, I talked to my DP, Greta Zozula, who's wonderful. We spent a lot of time talking about, I was like, look, I really want, maybe we start off and it's a cooler thing, but as these three are emotionally connecting, I want us to subtly warm things up a bit. And this is with the production designer too. And it should be subtle enough, but it we will viscerally feel that, right? Until things get cold again. Now, in terms of the floating at the hot springs, so this whole thing was it starts off talking about Plato's Symposium and this whole notion of finding your other half, right? And so as much as possible, I wanted like reflections and doubles and twinning. Like with the production designer, we often would be like, okay, let's make sure there's twinning and triangles. I'd said to my director, like, give me as many triangles as possible. Give me as much, like, and if you watch the movie, you'll hear subtle things. So I even wrote some pocket dialogue where the math teacher is talking about like triangles, and like the band teacher is talking about our triangles are missing, but like all of that. And so similarly, visually, like there's so many images of like when Ellie and Aster are texting each other, there's like their reflections against the glass for both of them, but we're also mirroring those images as like the subtle movement of the two when we're going back and forth. And that really comes together at the hot springs where both of them are lying there and you sort of see the doubles. And I felt like that is, again, just a very visual way to think about your other half, how we used to be, like the opening image of this, like we had two faces, right? So that was very much a way to sort of harken back to that whole idea of that starts in the beginning of the film, sort of, and the whole idea, the half of it, which is we're all looking for our other half.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a really beautiful scene. I remember watching that and being like, I was just like, this is beautiful. This is beautiful shooting. And I like also, I resonate with you in like how every single decision has an emotional reason for it. Like, you know, like, and I've heard you speak about the camera's going to move. It has to have an emotional reason behind it. And that's something that even myself and my DP on my feature, we just went through the script beat by beat, being like, what's the emotional reason, like center of this scene? And I think that's something I've heard you talk about a lot. And I think that's where you make your decisions for lenses and cameras based on that.
Yes.
So that's really,
I think Greta is amazing at that. Like, I think Greta she and I just happen to really get each other on that level. And I think she really got the motions of this. And like I hate unmotivated camera movement and she hates unmotivated lighting. And so it's like, we're both this film is a more naturalistic film than Saving Face. I was really trying to make the biggest romantic comedy I could on a shoestring, right? So that one was more like, okay, I'm going more for a in the mood for love, sort of Pedro Almodovar kind of thing, where it's like, let's elevate that. This one's a little more naturalistic because I really want us to feel like, oh, these kids exist. This place exists.
Yeah, yeah. There's another question from the audience. Were there any scenes / sequences that you yourself, quote unquote, script doctored that became breakthrough? I don't know if I don't know what
that means.
I'm not 100% either.
Maybe they don't, maybe script doctor. Well, so wait, so just people understand, script doctoring is when someone else has a script, like, and they give it to you to basically rewrite it in a, like to whether to polish it or like, so yeah, I don't really like script doctor my own scripts. It's more like a gig, but maybe what they're trying to say is, are there any scenes I had to rewrite during shooting? Is that?
Maybe, yeah, because usually, like I understand script doctoring is something else somebody else does, but maybe it means like things that you had to rework and rework and rework. Maybe that's, I'm gonna take it as that. Are there any scenes that you had to keep revising that end up actually becoming standout scenes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So weirdly, and I don't actually think this is normal for me. Weirdly on this script, no. Like on this script, like that's the part that was so shocking to me. Like we shot the second draft of my script, basically. I thought like, oh, I'll have to like, but then every time I would go to try and make something and I'd be like, I even a couple times tried like, maybe I'll rewrite that. And then like, I'd show it to someone I trust, like, no, it was better before. Right. So it was more like, that said, like I'm a hyper preparer, but it's invariable that when you are shooting that day, you never have enough time, you never have enough money. And it's inevitable that like these 5 shots we wanted now are gone, right? Like you get 1 shot or you get 2 shots. So one example is that we like lost about 4 hours once because the sun was just really not our friend. And it was, it's the shot where Trig is sitting in his truck happily slurping like a Slurpee or something. And then all of a sudden, Ellie and Paul appear on either side of him and are like, and, you know, one of them is like, you know, we're doing a profile on you. What are your views on women? Does Esther like lean meats? So that shot, initially that was supposed to be like 4 shots. Initially there was going to be like, there was Trig, there was going to be like on Paul, there was going to be like on Ellie, there was going to be like them above. And so that we would intercut like in like a move. But that day, the reflections, like there was just like no cloud cover. The sun was like beating so hard on the reflections of the car that it was impossible to get the shot. Like it was just, you couldn't. So then they were trying to rig a thing, like they were trying to manage to rig like something to block the sun, but it was like not quite working, and all this was happening. And time just kept going and going and going. And my producer's like, we're just going to have to move on. And I was suddenly like, you know what, let's just do this as a oneer. And if it doesn't work, like, let's just shoot it right now. And I'm like, we're going to be there. And then literally all I want is just a fast pull out. Like, we're going to be on Trig, and then boom, we pull out. And like the two of them are there. And the whole thing is like there, they go up, they come down. Like it's all one shot, right? And I actually think that shot works better than if we had intercut. Like there's just something so ridiculous about it. So yeah, that I think was a happy accident that came from just, we don't have time. So I think that would be an example.
Yeah, that's really smart filmmaking, is just like simplify. And then for comedic effect too, it really works. And I've heard you also talk about the whip pans during the texting.
Oh, that was super planned. No one thought that was going to work. I just had like this weird thing for months. I'm like, I really want to do this. And everyone was like, I don't know about that. And I'm like, look, I protected us. We could just cut the coverage, but I really like, if we pull this off, I think it'll be great. And then when it worked, I was like, cause like, honestly, you don't know until you get into the editing room.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I love all those. It just adds to that stylistic energy too of your whole film. Questions from the audience. What was your favorite scene to make and the hardest scene to make?
Ooh, God, let me see if I can remember. Favorite scene's a hard one because there were so many. I mean, I have to say, I really love those actors so much. I am a stickler on casting and probably read like 500 people for each of those 3 roles. And I was very adamant about casting fresh faces. And, I feel so lucky those 3 actors exist. Because not only are they wonderfully talented young actors, they're also just great people. And I think that's one advice I'd give to filmmakers, because I've been lucky enough on both my films. I also am still really close to the actors, like my 3 main actors on Saving Face, we're still really close. And similarly, they're just really great. Like I chose people who are like incredibly talented. I wasn't choosing like less talented people who are great people. But I also think that generally, I would generally say, especially on something that's yours, pick someone who you also just really like as a person. And that, because it was the most rewarding thing watching these 3 who just gave everything, like they were just so willing and open to like go with me, like where, and also to bring things that like I'd never seen before. And I think that, why it's hard for me to pick a favorite scene is that like every day something would happen. Like I was literally watching them grow into the characters, but also, and again, maybe I'm wrong about this and I don't know what they would say, but for me, maybe because they're young actors, I felt like I was also watching them grow as people. Like, they're at that age where like, and because I could physically have given birth to all of them, like to me, they're like my children, right? And I think it would be hard for me, like just every day, like even the most simple scene, like watching the amount of emotion and nuance they all brought to it. And just like no one left anything, like everyone left everything on the table. Like they just all brought it. And I think so that, it actually genuinely is really hard for me to pick a favorite scene to shoot. There's in terms of hard scenes, I mean, the hot springs day, we had to shoot all of that in one day. And we like lost the first half of the day so we had to shoot like everything. And like just before the sun was going down, it was so like all these shots I'd planned were like out the window. It was such a hard And it was also our last day of our shoot. But it was incredible. You know, it was hard because it's like, oh my gosh, you know, like there's so many things to, you know, there's like water, there's like different kinds of equipment. And it was such an important acting scene. Like that was one that those actors really had to carry it. Yeah, so I would say that, oh, I know what was a really hard scene to shoot. Sorry. So that one I would say was hard, but it was also like such an incredible, like while it was happening, I would say hilariously, an incredibly hard scene to shoot was Aster and Ellie's goodbye, because these birds were like relentlessly shrieking the entire time that they were like trying to, and actually happened a little at the hot springs too, but like they just would not stop shrieking. And it was like credit to my sound designer that we managed to clean a lot of that dialogue. But it also, I could tell, was just like we had to keep retaking things because they'd be trying to be in this emotional moment, and then some bird would just like yeah, and it was, so there's that. I would say that was a day that I remember. And also then it would like start pouring rain. Oh, and then the football. Okay, here's a perfect answer for actually, this is probably a better answer for a scene that we had to quickly redo. We lost our football field the day before we were going to shoot. And along with that, we're supposed to shoot all of our football scenes and the girls' bathroom scene all in one. And we lost the football field, which also meant we would lose the girls' bathroom along with it. And we had to like find a different football field and girls' bathroom. And it was hailing that day. So we had to shoot all of football in what felt like was like 3 hours. And like, it would just, so that was insane. But then the girls' bathroom was now a totally different girls' bathroom than Greta and I had planned for. So it was a totally different setup. It's at the end of the day, we're all exhausted. We had like, again, like 5 shots planned, and that whole thing is done in 1 shot, right? And we had like a master shot. So we shot 2 shots. We had a master shot, but then, and I think it works a lot better. Like the whole thing is like, we're on Ellie and then it's just rack focusing. It's like literally like we did it a few times. At one point there, you know, she said, go stand next to the AC. And I'd be like, okay, now rack to Aster. Okay, now rack back to Ellie. Okay, now rack to Aster. Now rack to like, and I think it actually played really beautifully in a way that was intimate, that had we been intercutting, we wouldn't have gotten.
Yeah, I remember that scene because I was like, take note, there's a simple way to do scenes. And this is I love mirrors for that, you know, like that you're able to just not make it overly complicated. And you know, I made a film that was quite like mobile camera and stuff, and now I don't want to do that anymore. So I when I watched that scene, I was like, this inspires me as a filmmaker to just simplify. Another question from the audience. We may have kind of answered this before a little bit, but what advice would you tell your younger self when you started filmmaking?
Ooh. It's a good question because I guess, I don't know, I guess everyone, you know, is on a different kind of trajectory. And I think for me, I think this is probably still true of me. Like I've discovered how much I do love filmmaking, but I think I fundamentally think about my life as like my life first. And then I like at a certain point you decide like, are you going to let filmmaking run your life, or are you going to your life run your work? Right. And I think I'm someone who I'm a workaholic, but there are a few things in my life that matter more. And I think, because I think I'm a human first and then a filmmaker, I think it somewhat saves me from the vicissitudes of the industry, right? Because I don't think this is an industry that generally speaking is a good one to attach your self-worth to, because the causal relationship between how hard you work or even how good your work is to the result is fairly tenuous. You know, like we all know people who are incredibly talented and work incredibly hard and who either didn't get their film made and it should have been made, or it got made and then disappeared, or something bad happened, right? And then we all know examples of people who probably should never have gotten that film made, and they're raking it in and they're getting to make more films. And, or someone, where good behavior and bad behavior makes a difference, but somehow in this industry, it doesn't always feel like it's such a direct mapping. And because of that, I think it's really good to have a sense of yourself outside of that. If that, like to just always kind of know, like, look, you're just going to do what makes sense to you in that moment, knowing that it's a little bit above your pay grade, what's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, know that if it matters to you, just keep staying with it until it stops mattering to you or until it happens, right? And that on some level, I am the perfect example of, like, I was in the industry. I spent a few years working for hire. I left for 8 years. Somehow I managed to make another movie, and like a teen movie, no less. And I'm like 50 years old, right? Like, so apparently anything can happen, right? So I feel like at any, I don't know, I guess if people can have that kind of longer perspective, maybe it will make them a little less anxious, and just know that, like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm articulating this right, but I guess I wish I had known that then, so I didn't go through that, like, oh no, I've messed up. I made this film and somehow I didn't convert it into like a career, right? Like, I was like, I felt like, okay, well, I guess I didn't. On some level, I felt like, oh, maybe I failed. And so it had I known that, like, no, you'll just make something when it matters to you, I think it would have given me a lot more peace.
Right. And what I take away from this conversation a lot is, like, knowing, not deriving your self-worth necessarily from the industry, from the work, but knowing yourself and knowing when it feels right to make a film. I think it's so, so important, and something I'm taking away from this. Another question here is, can you tell us about the next stories you have a burning need to tell, which I think kind of builds off what we were just talking about, and when we might be able to see them? No pressure.
Oh, that's so nice. Honestly, I don't talk about stuff I'm working on until I feel like it's worth talking about, which it is not yet. It's like once I take a break, I'm going to continue working and writing, because I do kind of have that thing of, like, I secretly do hope one of these things becomes something, but I do a little bit think there's some magic involved in storytelling too, where you show up and you do your best, and then if that happens, then you'll hear from me again. If not, then for me, I guess, someone the other day was saying how, like, watching the half of it really inspired her to, like, continue, like, like she was starting as a filmmaker. And to me, that makes me so happy, because obviously it just makes me happy because, like, you want to feel like people are inspired, but B, it totally takes the pressure off me. Like, it doesn't really matter if I ever make another film, because there are a lot of people out there. There's, like, a lot of great talent, right? And I've met a number of them. And I also feel like we're a very interesting moment in our industry where, because of Black Lives Matter, because of, like, a lot of things, where I feel like, for whatever reasons, like, people are just saying shit now. Like, they're just like maybe for years they didn't feel like they could, but right now they're a little bit like, I don't care if I get fired. This is what I think, right? And I'm here for that, because I feel like if there's one thing I hope our industry ends up changing, is I would love to see a culture shift where that kind of candidness is rewarded. Not like everyone just says everything they ever think, because I think sometimes, like, honestly, I have certain thoughts where it's, like, probably best if I don't voice those, right? But I think it all comes from intention. It's like, if someone is really intending to try and connect and intending to be like, hey, here's what I really think, and it's coming out of that place, I greatly prefer someone saying to me, like, hey, I don't know if this is right, or maybe this is racist, or I'm not sure, but here's what I'm thinking. And to give me the freedom to be like, yeah, this is what I honestly think about, this is why I don't like this note. And, like, if everyone could just reward that kind of candor and know that we're all trying, I actually think the work will get better. And I actually think that people will be happier in the industry. And so I'm secretly hopeful, as much as the world feels like there's a lot of shitty stuff happening right now. I am somewhat hopeful that this moment in time where people are starting to speak their truth more, I would love to see that start to infuse sort of every aspect of our lives, but especially our industry.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that even you're just such a self-aware filmmaker, and I think that is influential to a lot of people. And so we're almost out of time. I'm just going to read a comment from somebody to you, Alice. She says, Alice would make lots of films beautiful because she exudes decency and kindness, and decency pervades her two movies. I felt so uplifted during this pandemic watching the half of it.
Oh,
so I
thank you.
just wanted to leave you with that as we wrap up. I've had I've learned so much from you in this, and I will think about this as I go and maybe as I'm developing my second feature. But I think that everybody got a real treat listening to everything you had to say tonight. It was so genuine and thoughtful, just like your film. So I just wanted to thank you. And just if everybody's wondering, you can watch the half of it on Netflix, and also people should go and watch Saving Face as well. I recommend both films highly.
Jasmin, thank you so much. This was like such a genuine pleasure, and I'm so excited for you too. Like in your in your career, I can't wait to see what you do next, and I'm certainly here for you to cheer you on. And I think it's really important that your voice is out there. And it's a lot of work. I think it's actually, I don't know if people realize how hard it is to interview people. Like you did such a great job and made it so easy for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And thanks for everybody who tuned in tonight. And go watch the half of it on Netflix.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.